WrestleMania 42. Now, there's been a lot talked about that since 1 week ago when it was announced that New Orleans would not be the host any longer of WrestleMania 42. And there's a few questions that I have regarding that haven't necessarily been addressed. I've listened to SiriusXM Radio. I've heard the Sam Roberts podcast. I've seen a lot of different items when it comes to it. I've even made kind of an emergency YouTube video, if you will, as they call them nowadays, emergency podcast, about some of the takeaways related to New Orleans no longer being the home for WrestleMania 42. But there's a lot of questions that I don't understand. And believe me, none of these questions are going to be about WWE making any less money. In fact, I know that obviously all their motivations right now are about making as much money as possible. And some parts of this decision to get away from New Orleans has kind of turned fans off a little bit because they obviously are seeing it forthcoming more than they ever have before. We talked about this about a year ago when Triple H started getting on about how WWE is breaking gates and breaking money records, and how fans at first were cheering and chanting, whether it's in France or Scotland, about how this is the largest gate in WWE history. And they kind of felt, yeah, that's awesome, I was a part of it, kind of thing, until now, as time is going on, they're starting to open their eyes a little more and go, wait a minute, these revenues are all because we, the fans, are being fleeced. Now, none of this is going to be about WWE, again, not trying to make the most amount of money. That's not it at all. In fact, I am kind of confused because their avenue here is to make the most amount of money, and how I don't understand them moving WrestleMania helps that. For those who aren't necessarily familiar, last week, WWE announced, or less New Orleans first announced, but then WWE followed suit by saying that WrestleMania 42, originally announced in New Orleans, originally announced to be at the Superdome, was no longer going to be taking place there. Instead, Money in the Bank 2026, which now it's going to be in August next year, that's another story, will be taking place from New Orleans, and a future WrestleMania will come to Louisiana in coming years. Now, obviously, rumors were, why did WWE do this? And as time went along, it seemed that a lot of people are on the assumption that WWE is going to go back to Las Vegas. They haven't announced any dates yet. They're still trying to hammer that through. You think maybe they would have hammered that through before doing this announcement of pulling from New Orleans. But according to many right now, there's actually some conflicts going on. So the idea of WrestleMania next year for sure, unlike this year being on Easter, well, next year being on Easter is still a possibility, folks. So another WrestleMania on Easter, as of right now, is a possibility because, again, there's no dates. They pulled away from the April 11th and 12th, which was supposed to be next year in New Orleans. And, well, new dates, new location, we're all, in flux. There's nothing guaranteed of when WrestleMania is going to be or where it's going to be. But here's the things that were not necessarily talked about when it comes to, why they pulled it and the benefits of pulling it, right? WWE announced, and this is where Brandon will bring you in a little bit on this, right? WWE announced that WrestleMania 42 was going to be in New Orleans already. And they pulled back from it and then announced that a future WrestleMania is going to be in New Orleans. And some of the talk right now is about, obviously, WWE loving Las Vegas. They were just there. They made a ton of money. They want to do it again. But if they're announcing that they're going to go to New Orleans in future years anyways, what necessarily would be the benefit of pulling out of this year's or this upcoming year's WrestleMania if the obligation is they have to go at some point anyway to New Orleans? Meaning that if they go to Las Vegas next year, they still have to go to New Orleans. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter in which order they do that in. I think this order costs more money.
Did they say specifically why they pulled New Orleans out?
No announcement. Just that WWE is choosing to not be in New Orleans. Obviously, it has to do most likely with being a bigger bid, right? New Orleans bid. And then they must have had to renegotiate and said, hey, we're getting offered more money to go somewhere else. A lot of obviously rumors were both Las Vegas and Saudi Arabia. We all know that they're on the table to bid for a future WrestleMania. Oh, yeah. So they said, we're not going to be going this year. Probably had to renegotiate to give them two events, giving them both Money in the Bank and WrestleMania in order to get out of that deal, right? Because I imagine a deal was already in place. So WWE had to actually sweeten the deal for New Orleans to get out of it.
Well, yeah, you just hit the nail on the head where they're getting a future, they're getting a future Money in the Bank and a future WrestleMania, for WWE to say, yeah, we're gonna not do WrestleMania 42 in New Orleans. So that is definitely a real thing. That's a legal contract type of thing where there had to be some sort of exit clause. I'm not a legal scholar or a lawyer or anything like that.
Just an agreement like, hey, if you guys agree to get out of this deal, we'll sign a deal that gets you something sweeter down the line.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. And I think you're onto something there too with the bids where maybe Vegas. Now, Saudi Arabia, that's another thing because let's be honest, I think we all, anyone that listens to our podcast, watches it, any wrestling fan that follows WWE in general knows Saudi Arabia has unlimited resources when it comes to money. So I don't think Saudi Arabia will ever get outbid. I think they'll pay whatever they'll pay the king's ransom. It's just depending on a particular year that WWE says, yeah, we're ready to take that jump. They're going to make a good chunk of change because the Saudi Arabian folks are going to pay up. But I would say Las Vegas, or maybe there's another venue, another city, so to speak, that we're not talking about. Maybe that's what happened.
What is so special about WrestleMania 42? Why is WrestleMania 42 so special, as if it's the last and only WrestleMania that's going to happen?
You know why these cities they're bidding up they're kind of getting, it sounds like it's getting bid up, like you alluded to, like somebody came in with a better offer for that particular venue for that particular show. I think what the draw is, we've talked about it. You experience it. You've been to the last like 10, 12 WrestleManias. There's a lot of money that comes into that particular city. So what they're thinking is they're seeing the amount of money that's coming into the city and they're like, okay, if we'll bid X amount of dollars, knowing we're going to probably get at least this much, we're going to make more money. We're going to make money at the end of the day for our economy locally in that particular city. So that's why WrestleMania 42 is such a big thing, because everybody wants to get in. These bigger cities want to get in.
I guess I might say not WrestleMania 42 in the sense of WrestleMania. I mean WrestleMania 42 in the sense of that particular WrestleMania. Because, again, WrestleMania is still coming to New Orleans. I look at it like this, right? Chicago, you got two baseball teams in Chicago. You buy tickets to go to a Cubs game. You drive to Chicago. You got the plans all set. You realize, hey, the White Sox, they're also in town. I got an idea. I'm going to back out. I'm going to go to a White Sox game instead. I'm going to take a hit on my Cubs tickets because I already bought them. I'm going to remaneuver all my plans to go to a White Sox game. And then next year, I'm going to come back and go to a Cubs game. Hey, most people would say, why don't you just go to the Cubs game now while those plans are in set and then make the plans to go to a White Sox game?
As baseball fans, though, it's tongue-in-cheek. And sorry to our White Sox fan listeners here of the podcast. But, like, who's going to Chicago for a White Sox game or a Cubs game? I'm just saying.
Well, I'm going to let you know, because the reason I brought that up is because last year I was actually in Chicago to see the Cubs and the Blue Jays, which gave me the idea that, well, they don't go to the Cubs every single year, that this year I have a plan to go to Chicago to see the White Sox and the Blue Jays. But the idea is that if you already have a plan in place, right, you should just stick to that plan if the idea is you're going to just go back and do it again in the future, right? So while you had New Orleans set, you can say, I got an idea, Las Vegas, similar to what the NFL does. If Las Vegas came in right now and said, hey, we want the Super Bowl and we're willing to pay this much money, they would say absolutely, and pencil it in and take the check and look down the line where the opening for the next Super Bowl is and pencil them in. They're not going to just jump the line to have the next Super Bowl. They'll take their money and Los Angeles's money and Miami's money at the same. So why can't they just say, Las Vegas, we can't wait to come back for WrestleMania. We are so pumped. In fact, we're going to announce it that WrestleMania 43 is coming back to Las Vegas, and you're paying this much money.
Maybe it was a king's ransom that WWE really couldn't refuse. Maybe I'm just speculating. We don't know, because obviously I asked that question to you, like, hey, did you hear something about it? Because I haven't heard anything as to why this is happening. But to me, it wouldn't be a surprise, because we've talked about this for, ever since Triple H has brought up record gates, record this, record that when it comes to money. I'm wondering if if another city, we'll say Las Vegas, for example, they made an offer that WWE's like, man, I don't really want to pass that up right now. The iron's pretty hot right now with WWE. Why don't we cash in on that? And then we'll work out a deal with New Orleans and we'll go back to them later and we'll sweeten it up and we'll get them a Money in the Bank just so we could cash in and make more money for WrestleMania 42. That's what I'm thinking.
And we know that WrestleMania 41 made the most amount of money that WWE's ever made at a WrestleMania.
Oh, yeah. They'll tell you about it. They'll tell you.
And it's obviously and even on the fact that there's less people at this WrestleMania because this stadium was the smallest stadium WrestleMania that they've had since probably they were at Safeco Field for Seattle. They've been at big football stadiums since. So the fact that they only got like 68,000, whatever, which is a very large number per night. I mean, that's not in comparison to over 70 something thousand for Philadelphia, like 80,000 plus in Dallas, 80,000 plus like in the other cities. So it actually was a lower number. And I think, WWE talks about Las Vegas and it's a place that they make a lot of money, but I personally think that they could make just as much money in a place like New Orleans as they could Las Vegas. In fact, because New Orleans, one, has more seats available. So what you could actually do is you can make as much money or more money by lowering the ticket prices just slightly, but the idea that you sell more of them in New Orleans, so the fans think, boy, it's great that they're in New Orleans because the tickets are like a couple $100 less this time around, when in all honesty, it's just the idea that you're selling more of them at a little bit of a discount because we know the New Orleans stadium can hold like 75,000 plus per night. So you get 75,000 plus per night at a little bit of a discount. WrestleMania is just like the Super Bowl in the sense of it's going to make money wherever it is. And I know people say that Las Vegas, you can charge those crazy ticket prices in Las Vegas because it's Las Vegas. But I personally think that whatever people paid in Las Vegas to go to WrestleMania, they would pay elsewhere as well because it is a destination. And when you say Las Vegas is a destination, it is, but WrestleMania itself is a destination. I didn't pay the price to go to WrestleMania based on thinking it was in Las Vegas and it was going to be more money. If they told me that New Orleans next year was going to be the same price and I'm going to have to fork over the same thing that I did in Las Vegas, I mean, okay, that's what I'm kind of expecting because it's WrestleMania. I'm not looking at it based on the place itself. So I don't see why WWE can't make the same amount of money in New Orleans. I remember Michael Cole. Well, it's funny because Michael Cole once actually said the last time they were in New Orleans that if there was a city out there that was tailor-made to host WrestleMania every single year, it would be New Orleans. And it's funny that that's the city that they're backing out of now to go to the city in which now many believe is tailor-made to be a regular host of WrestleMania in Las Vegas, Nevada. But the problem, obviously, with that of being a regular and an every year thing is that they still do owe New Orleans a future WrestleMania. They still do owe Indianapolis a future WrestleMania. And like we talked about, there's no doubt that Saudi Arabia is not going to get in there and also be hosting. So there's multiple places that even if Las Vegas said they want to host WrestleMania on a regular basis, they're going to have to go to these other places at some point. And I just think it would look better as if they maybe took a year off from like a place like Las Vegas, went to New Orleans, fulfilled that commitment, and then went back. And I think a big thing about making money, right, is having that kind of break because a fan like myself, right? Because WrestleMania cost so much money last year in Las Vegas and because we just went to Las Vegas, there might be a few of us out there who say 2 years in a row, yeah, you know what? I don't know about next year. Now, if they said 3-4 years down the line, then yeah, absolutely. But there's going to be a fan out there who's going to say, been there, done that. And we just went there. We just spent too much money to go to WrestleMania, the most ever. And it's going to be maybe discouraged. So a place like New Orleans might give them that kind of break to go to New Orleans and then go back to Las Vegas. Las Vegas gets stuff all the time where they got new casinos, new hotels. They're building them left and right. The problem is they don't build them fast enough for me to go back in 8 or 9 months and it to be a different place. If I went back in 3 or 4 years, as we know, the Oakland Athletics, they're going to be moved in there in a couple of years. The Mirage Casino, which has been torn down, they're in the process of turning that into this big Hard Rock Casino. That'll be there in a few years. So maybe if you let New Orleans maybe change a little bit, grow a little bit, that kind of thing, there would be a reason to entice me back to the exact place that I just was.
Here's my thing, and you experienced it because you go to the different WrestleManias in different cities. Like I mentioned, like the last decade plus in a row. Minus obviously COVID. We don't really count that one. That's kind of a whole separate thing. But my thing is, as a fan, and you as someone who travels to every WrestleMania, wouldn't you not want to go to Las Vegas every other year? Wouldn't you want to go to, or even every 3 years? Wouldn't you want to go to other cities?
Absolutely. I love Las Vegas. Been many times. Can find many reasons to go to Las Vegas without having to go for wrestling. I've gone to Las Vegas many times for not wrestling more times than not, right? Than for events, just to go to a place like Las Vegas. And I think actually the fact that it returns to Las Vegas kind of discourages in a way. I do feel like probably if it goes to Las Vegas, I'm probably going to go. I'm going to go probably a little bit differently, meaning that this time around, I might not go to, let's say, SmackDown or stuff like that, because again, I just did that. Might diversify some of my stuff, might stay at a casino that's not necessarily as close to Allegiant Stadium because we just did that. Try to like explore different things, I guess. You know, every time you try to do something different than you did the time before, and I'd be more apt to do that because I just did all those things. So not going to SmackDown at the T-Mobile back-to-back years isn't going to affect me that much, that kind of thing. But one of the points, and this is one of the major points I want to talk about that I think really got lost in all of this, and that is in 2021, SummerSlam was at Allegiant Stadium. The first WWE event at Allegiant Stadium kind of gets forgotten about, kind of gets lost. That WWE's already been to Allegiant Stadium, already hosted a stadium event there. It was only about a few weeks after it opened to the public, because we all remember, as we just talked about, COVID, right? So this was like the real WrestleMania for 2021. Got 50,000 fans in attendance, the largest crowd in a year and a half to go see a WWE show, because it's essentially the rebirth of WWE back on the road and such, right? Well, at SummerSlam 2021, you may forget, they made an announcement, and that's saying, hey, speaking of Allegiant Stadium, we're thinking this is a great place. We're going to come back here in about 8 or 9 months for Money in the Bank. We're not expecting 50,000 because we know that that's a tough task. But if we can just get 30,000, because again, this is Las Vegas, it's a tourist town. People are always loving to come here for any reason. We always have people coming and going out of Las Vegas. So we're going to come to Las Vegas in about 8 or 9 months for Money in the Bank. In fact, Cody Rhodes, he wasn't a part of the company then, but when he became a part of the company right after the Dallas WrestleMania, he was a part of the Money in the Bank commercial promoting Allegiant Stadium. You know, I remember him at the 50-yard line looking around and saying, you know, all the Money in the Bank phrases. And they were trying to sell tickets. And guess what? Because people like myself said, been there, done that. We were just there for SummerSlam. We don't need to rush back to Las Vegas. They sold about 12,000 tickets and had to move it at the last minute into the MGM because of that fact. And you think that they would be smart enough to remember, hey, we tried this literal thing not too long ago where we tried to be like, hey, let's just go there all the time. It's a built-in fan base. People are going to come. If you build it, they will keep coming, they said. And that was not the case just 4 years ago when they said, nope, not really interested in, and they weren't even looking for 60,000. They were looking for just 30,000, right? Just a little bit more than an arena holds. And they couldn't get it. So they had to move Money in the Bank into the MGM Grand, where they got about 12,000 people instead. So you think this exact venue having this exact issue, and then the fact that you had to essentially back out on a deal that you already had in place, like it just doesn't make any sense, because again, you're going to be going to New Orleans anyways. We don't see this in the NFL. We don't see this in the NCAA hosting the Final Four. You know, the Super Bowl, you know that they've already, and the Olympics even included, right? They all have where they're going to be announced for many years in the future. Just because Paris or Tokyo or any of these places are going to hold the Olympics doesn't mean that they supersede the ones that come before it. You get in line. We're going to take your money just like we're taking their money. I just don't understand what is so essentially great about WrestleMania 42 that WrestleMania 42 has to be here and they can't wait until WrestleMania 43 to have it, right? If anything, right, you think if they got that little bit of a break, there'd just be even more money down the line. And I just don't understand that element of it, right? WrestleMania is not going anywhere. It's going to be around for the next couple of years. Yeah. You can sign them up. Minneapolis, right? SummerSlam 2026. Not this year, next year, right? They've already announced it. Before MetLife Stadium was even a thought to host SummerSlam 2025, Minneapolis said, we want SummerSlam 2026. They announced it 2.5 years in advance. There was no, well, it has to be now. It has to be this year. It has to be this upcoming SummerSlam. They've had, and they're going to have 2 SummerSlams in the span of time before they finally get to Minneapolis, because they just pencil them in down the line. So Las Vegas, Saudi Arabia, wherever is hosting WrestleMania 42, it's going to be a great place. I just don't know why, or wherever hosting WrestleMania 42, I just don't know why they had to have 42 and they couldn't just wait for 43. And that way deals are honored. And, you know, you have, you know, where it doesn't make any sense. Money is going to be money, whether it comes today or it comes down the line. Yeah. That's what I just don't understand when it comes to this. And if we've already learned, right, Las Vegas had this issue with Money in the Bank. So we wait and see if it's going to be in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium again. And I guess we wait and see, because this is going to be, I'm very curious. Las Vegas isn't like New Orleans, or New Orleans or New York City or Los Angeles, where you sometimes can have a built-in. And some people talk about LA and New York City, those times where they're hosting like SummerSlam, like 6 consecutive years at the Barclays Center and at Staples Center. But those are small crowds. Those are 20,000 less, right? I'm very curious to see if they are going to Las Vegas, exactly what kind of reaction they're going to get. And I hope that they don't have to announce Las Vegas and then with slow ticket sales or something like that, have to go back and announce a different place. So I guess we will find out, but that is a story we'll push off. But those are just some points I wanted to make about this whole thing of New Orleans no longer hosting WrestleMania. And I guess one curious last fact is Money in the Bank just going to be at the arena, or are they going to try? Because they haven't tried since Allegiant Stadium. Since then, Money in the Bank has just been at arenas. They never went back and tried the stadium gimmick. We know it's one of the bigger pay-per-views. Do you think maybe they try to put it in the Superdome when it finally is in 2026? We'll find out down the line.